And the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is with me now in Salford. Prime Minister, let's start by talking about the case that is obsessing the country quite rightly. I think up and down this country, women are asking the same question in their millions. If I am stopped in the street by a single male police officer and he asks me to follow his instructions, what should I do?
I think people should trust the police, and I think it's very, very important that people should have confidence in our police. I think up and down the country there will be literally hundreds of thousands of wonderful police men and women who will be utterly sickened by what happened, by the murder of Sarah Everard. And I think where you're right completely is to refer to that feeling amongst millions of people. I think what's going on is that the murder of Sarah Everard and the way it has happened has triggered the feelings of huge numbers of people about what is going on in the handling of crimes of sexual domestic violence and also rape, and the way we deal with those crimes, and the way the police deal with those crimes. And what we want to do, irrespective of the ways in which, you can certainly argue that many types of crime are coming down, including, as it happens, stranger murders and so on. There is a phenomenon, which is that rape prosecutions are taking too long, and we're not convicting enough rapists, and we need to deal with it. And people feel it. They know instinctively that something is going wrong. So there's a number of things that we need to do. We need to fix the crime side of it, but we also need to look at the whole criminal justice system.
I'd like to come to the rape issue later, but the problem is that Sarah Everard did exactly what you're suggesting women do. She trusted the police. She saw his warrant card, and we know what happened after that. And also, the Met Police itself doesn't agree with what you're saying. They put out advice saying that if you're in any way suspicious of the policeman and you're a woman, what you should do is shout or knock on doors or ring 999 or flag down a bus.
If you're suspicious about the way you're being treated by a police officer, then and you're worried for some reason, then clearly you should seek help in the way that you've described. But my view is that the police do overwhelmingly a wonderful job, and what I want is I want the public, and I want women in particular, girls and young women, women of all ages, to trust the police, and they are overwhelmingly trustworthy. What has happened has been appalling, and I think that the IOPC needs to get to the bottom of the circumstances surrounding Wayne Couzens. We need to find out exactly what happened. We need to look into all these this sharing of WhatsApp stuff by members of the Met. We need to get to the bottom of what has happened. But more fundamentally, we need to address the ways in which we as a society, the police in particular, the criminal justice system, handle the issues handle rape, handle domestic violence, and the ways in which too many women currently feel that their complaints are not being taken seriously enough.
Sticking on Wayne Couzens, there are allegations that he was involved in indecent exposure and allegations too that his nickname in the police was the rapist. And therefore a lot of people are asking, how could he possibly have got into the police? Ian Blair, Lord Blair, former commissioner, says there must now be a public inquiry. You could set a lot of people's minds at rest, perhaps, by agreeing this morning there should be a public inquiry into this terrible case.
Well, the first thing that needs to happen is that the Independent Office of Police Complaints needs to look into what happened. The Met is of course themselves looking into all the officers that have been associated with the sharing of these messages.
Why not a public inquiry?
What I'm saying to you is that I think that we do need to look systemically at not just at the Wayne Couzens case, but at the whole handling of rape, domestic violence, sexual violence, and female complaints.
You mentioned rape a couple of times.
About harassment altogether, because it is a phenomenon.
You've mentioned rape a couple of times, and there's been an allegation that there's a problem in the culture, you've said yourself. But actually, a lot of people think it's not the culture, it's the funding. Your own inspectorate, your own independent inspector said that the system has been under-resourced so that it is close to breaking point. Will you replace the 25% that's been cut from the Justice Department over the last 10 years to allow them to focus on violence against women? 79 women have died since Sarah Everard through violent attacks.
The problem in the justice system is, and we're certainly putting record sums into all parts of government, but the problem in the justice system is, I'm afraid, more complex than that. And what you've got are delays at every stage.
To say that money matters.
I hear that, and we're investing massively in policing and in crime
to replace the 25% cut,
and in all aspects of the criminal justice system. But what you've got to fix is the very complex business of the evidence that the CPS is handling and that the police are collating. And the delays are coming up in that moment between the report of an offence and the passing of that offence to the prosecutors. And what is not working properly is that the CPS and the prosecutors are not working well enough with the police to assure women that a decent case is presented and that there is a chance of prosecution. And what's happened, I'm afraid,
to sum up, you won't replace the 25% and you won't have a public inquiry.
Well, no, I'm afraid you're putting words into my mouth on both things. Well, we will look into we're looking into the Wayne Couzens case, and we're going to make sure that we get to the bottom of what happened. But what I'm telling you today, Andrew, is that this government takes what has happened incredibly seriously, and I want you to know that we will stop at nothing to make sure that we get more rapists behind bars and that we have more successful prosecutions for rape and for sexual violence, because that, I think, is where it is going wrong. And
it is the problem. At the end of this Parliament, women are safer in this country than they are today. Can you stake your premiership on making sure that women are safer than they are now?
I will do and look at my record. When I was Mayor of London, I set up the first ever strategy in any major city to tackle violence against women and girls. We invested massively in independent domestic violence advisors, independent sexual violence advisors. We set up rape crisis centres around the whole city. I totally believe in this agenda. We will do everything we can to sort it out. There are problems, as you rightly say, there are problems in the criminal justice system. It is not solely a question of money. It is also about the way we handle evidence, mobile phone data that takes a very long time to collate, and the ways in which the law is preventing successful prosecutions from being mounted. We need to fix it. And what's happening is that too many women are spending too long waiting for their cases to be heard, and you're seeing.
You're going to have to spend more money to sort that out.
You're seeing, and we are spending. You are going to have to spend more still. We are spending more money. We are spending more money, and we are spending record sums across the whole public services, and you know that. But it is not just a question of money. You need the three parts of the criminal justice system: the police, the prosecutors, the judiciary, the criminal justice. They need to work better together. And people need, and rape victims, domestic violence victims, need to get a better service.
And under Boris Johnson, they will.
At the moment, and we are pledged to do that.
All right.
The moment they don't,
let's move on if we may.
We will ensure that they do.
Let's move on, if we may, from the crisis in policing, and there has been a crisis in policing, to the crisis among lorry drivers, and particularly the petrol crisis. Your Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, says that the problems may continue all the way up to Christmas. Is he right?
What you've got at the moment is a shortage of lorry drivers, shortage of truck drivers that's affecting the whole world. There's even a shortage of truck drivers in China. There's a shortage in America and in Poland. When you look at the particular issue on the petrol forecourts, there you've got a problem that actually now is very largely driven by demand. I mean, I understand people's frustrations, and I understand how infuriating it is when you turn up and you can't get any...
Demand is half of the market.
I totally understand that. But we're making sure that we have the supplementary drivers where necessary. And what I would say to you is that the way forward for our country is not to just pull the big lever marked uncontrolled immigration and and allow in huge numbers of people to do work.
Though you've cranked it a bit of the way, haven't you?
In a controlled way, that's entirely sensible. But what some people are saying is have hundreds of thousands of people in, which I don't think is sensible. Now, let me just this is a very, very serious point, because our country, has been running at a comparatively low rate of wage growth for a long time, basically stagnant wages and totally stagnant productivity, and not as much growth as this country can achieve. And that is because chronically we have failed to invest in people, we've failed to invest in equipment, and you've seen wages flat. So what
I'm sorry, Prime Minister, let me just come back to my original question, which you may have forgotten.
The old failed model
my original
of
question,
low wages,
which you may have forgotten,
low skills, supported by uncontrolled immigration.
Is Rishi Sunak right in saying that these problems, these delays, could go on until Christmas, or is he wrong?
I think what you're seeing,
just right or wrong,
is I think Rishi is right invariably
right,
in
so
everything he says. But what you're seeing is that depends how you interpret what he's saying, Andrew.
It's not difficult. You said they're going to go on until Christmas.
Well, what you're certainly seeing is the stresses and strains caused in a UK economy that is now the fastest growing in the G7, with 2 million fewer unemployed than had been predicted, with the ONS revising our growth rates upwards now. And of course, as we come out of COVID, all those things
are interesting.
They are interesting. The sort of thing I'm sure our viewers would love to know.
I'm sticking on the HGV crisis at the moment, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Now, you're training up British lorry drivers to take the strain.
Yes.
How long before significant numbers of newly trained British lorry drivers are on the roads helping us?
The issue at the forecourts is fundamentally one of supply.
That's not my question. Was about how long.
We've got to make sure that people come on stream as fast as we practically can. But the issue at the forecourts is fundamentally one of supply. And what we want to see, just on lorry drivers, let me just go specifically to your point about lorry drivers, because it's a fantastic example of the issue. What we had for decades was a system whereby basically the road haulage industry, which is a great industry full of fantastic people, was not investing in the truck stops, not improving conditions, not improving pay, and we relied on very hard-working people who were willing to come in, largely from European accession countries, to do that work under those conditions.
And so we closed them off.
That is why that job, with those pay and those conditions, is not currently attractive. What you need to do, this is a very important point, what you need to do is make sure that people now invest in basic equipment, such as truck stops and such as better pay.
The logic of what you're saying is that the shortages and the short-term problems are an inevitable result of the policy, that to get higher productivity, to get higher wages, we as a country have to go through some bumps, some shortages, some queues on the way. And that, folks, is what you voted for. When you voted for Boris's Brexit, that's what it meant.
When people voted for change in 2016 and when people voted for change again in 2019, as they did, they voted for the end of a broken model of the UK economy that relied on low wages and low skill and chronic low productivity. And we're moving away from that. We're investing massively in skills. We're investing massively in infrastructure. We're going to be talking in a minute
towards bluster.
No, it's not.
Well, let me ask you a direct question. When were you first warned about the HGV driver crisis?
There's been shortages in HGV drivers for a very long time. And it's a chronic problem, and it is particularly acute in the UK because of the reasons that I went into in some detail just now.
OK, you're not going to tell me, so I'm going to tell you. The Road Haulage Association wrote to you personally on June the 23rd, saying there is a big crisis building up, and you didn't answer them. You didn't respond to it at all.
We've known about shortages in road haulage for long before then.
So why not do something about it?
They've been a chronic feature of the way in which the road haulage industry has worked. And what needs to happen now is that people need to be decently paid, and you need to have investment in their conditions.
We're acknowledging in this part of the interview that this is part of the Brexit plan. Because you mentioned abroad, you mentioned abroad as well, and we have checked with the equivalent of the Petrol Retailers Association in France, Poland, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Spain. No other country in the EU is seeing the kind of problems in the petrol forecourts that Britain is, and by the way, not even Northern Ireland. So why is it happening here?
There is, as I said to you, there is a particular problem to do with demand in this country, and it certainly in parts. And actually, if I may just use your good offices, Andrew, to point out that the problem, although I accept people's frustration and people's irritation, it has been abating. What you're hearing now from the Petrol Retailers Association is that the suppliers are getting onto the forecourts, and as demand
things are still very bad in the southeast and in London. Things are bad in the southeast and London, and the Petrol Retailers Association warned you about this in June, and you didn't do anything about it. Let me ask you about another part of industry, which is warning you right now. 120,000 pigs are going to have to be killed and incinerated if there is no answer to the shortage of abattoir and butchery workers in the next 10 days. That would be the single biggest cull of healthy animals ever to happen in the history of British agriculture. You have 10 days to deal with that. What are you going to do?
Well, I hate to break it to you, Andrew, but I'm afraid that our food processing industry does involve killing a lot of animals, and that is
butchering them and then selling them for food. But that's not what we're talking about.
That is the reality. I think your viewers need to understand that. That's just what happens. But what you're talking again about an issue to do with a shortage of a particular type of workforce, and actually, what I think needs to happen is again there is a question about the types of jobs that are being done, the pay that is being offered, the levels of automation, the levels of investment in those jobs.
You don't have a short-term answer.
You
don't have a short-term answer. So when people see pictures of all those pigs being killed in farms and incinerated rather than being sold for food, sausages
so they're also going to be killed. I think people need to understand, before you try to obfuscate this point, the fact is, Andrew, that whatever happens to...
So it's fairly straightforward. The farmer grows the pig, which then goes to an abattoir and is killed and sold for food. And that is how the farmer makes his income. What we're talking about is the pigs being too big and unwanted because they haven't got abattoirs to kill them, and they're being killed on the farm and then simply incinerated. It's totally different.
Right.
And I'm asking whether you have an answer in the short term to that problem, and you don't have an answer. Let me ask you about one other area.
So if I may say so, the great hecatomb of pigs that you describe has actually not yet taken place. Let's see what happens.
But if it does happen, it's my fault, you say.
Let's see what happens. I'm not saying it's your fault, Andrew. I wouldn't dream
your fault.
I wouldn't dream of blaming you for, in spite of everything you're trying to do. I wouldn't blame you. But what I would say is that what we can't do is, in all these sectors, simply go back to the tired, failed old model, reach for the lever called uncontrolled immigration, get people in at low wages,
and that's part of the plan.
Let me ask about low wages.
Let me ask about something else.
And yes,
so we're talking about
there will be a period of adjustment, but that is, I think, what we need to see.
So we're going through a period of adjustment.
We need look at
you mentioned wages and incomes.
Productivity rates.
Let me ask you. Energy prices are shooting up. Food prices are going up. Inflation is going up. Why do you choose this minute to take £20 off the budgets of the poorest families in this country?
What you're seeing in this country at the moment is a country that's coming out of a pandemic in which the state had to spend £407 billion to look after people's livelihoods. And there was a whole package of measures, from furlough to bounce-back loans to the COVID uplift, that are no longer appropriate. What you're seeing instead is record creation of jobs you're seeing growth.
And what we're seeing is...
Sorry, can I just
Prime
finish this
Minister,
point? Growth faster... Sorry, this is very important. Growth faster than anywhere in the G7. Unemployment 2 million lower. And what we think, what this government thinks, is that is the way forward. Because what you're also seeing is finally growth in wages. After more than 10 years of flatlining, what you're seeing is people on low incomes being paid more. And by the way, here's an example of levelling up.
Let me just finish this point. Because you said something that isn't true, I'm afraid.
Let me finish
this point. You said
something
something that isn't true about wages.
The wages are growing.
The Office of National Statistics, the ONS, your own body, in the last reporting period, the 3 months running through to July, says that wages are not keeping pace with inflation. So in other words, in real terms, over the last 3 months, wages have gone down, not up. You're shaking your head, but these are ONS, these are government figures.
Wages are finally going up for the low paid, and they're going up faster, by the way, than they are for those on high incomes, and about time too.
Well, that's not what the numbers show.
No, that is what the numbers show. And it's about time we had that in this country. The wages have been totally flatlining for more than a decade. And what we would rather do is help people into better paid, better skilled jobs, which is what is happening, investing in people's skills with a lifetime skills guarantee, kickstart schemes, massive investment in FE colleges, all the things that we're doing. I'd much rather see that, Andrew, than raising taxes to subsidise low pay.
And yet you are raising taxes. You've raised national insurance.
We're raising taxes to pay, of course,
well, let me ask you a direct
to pay for the NHS. And I think people also understand that.
All right,
they understand
that we need to invest
about
in
our National Health Service.
Let me ask you a direct question about your tax rise.
A huge amount, yes.
A social care worker on the basic wage, the living wage, how much is she going to be paying as a result of the national insurance tax rise from April?
We're investing already £500 million into the care.
So how much is she going to be paying?
I can't give you the figure, but
okay.
what we're doing, we've increased her living wage already by record amounts to £8.91 an hour, and we're also investing in the whole care homes, whole care sector massively, and
minimum wages have not gone up by record amounts.
We've just put 500 million into supporting the whole care profession.
Okay. All right. So you're not going to give me a figure for that social care worker and how much more tax she's going to be paying. Let me ask you another question. How much will a millionaire getting huge hundreds of thousands of pounds of rental income have to pay in extra taxes for national insurance?
Look, if you want to know who's going to be paying the most from national insurance, do you know who it is? It's the banks.
Well, let me show you the answer to my questions.
And I'll tell you.
Let me show you the answer to the questions.
And the richest,
there is the social
20%.
care. There's a social care nurse, £121. The landlord, the millionaire landlord, pays absolutely nothing. Not a bean, zip, not a peseta, nothing.
It's a totally different tax, because the people who are paying the most for the NHS. And the people who are paying the most to fund the NHS bounce back, the £36 billion that we're putting in, are the richest, the wealthiest people in society, and that's entirely right. That's what's happening. If you look at the national insurance bill, the biggest payers of that national insurance bill are the banks, Andrew, and you should point that out. And that's the right way forward.
I think you've just pointed that out, but let me put it to you that you are running one of the highest taxing governments, certainly the highest taxing government in my lifetime, the highest taxing government since the 1940s, and a lot of
you began this interview by calling for more spending in virtually every sector of the economy, particularly the criminal justice system.
I haven't called for anything.
You've asked me to intervene in all sorts of markets.
It's easier for you to raise
such
taxes,
as the pig slaughtering industry. You've asked for more public spending on the criminal justice system. We don't want to raise more taxes. We don't want to raise more taxes.
You're raising corporation tax. You're freezing income tax thresholds, which we both know is in effect a tax rise, and there's national insurance. And that takes you, as I say, to the highest spending, highest tax raising, biggest state party that we have had in this country since the 1940s. You know, you all stand in front of pictures of Margaret Thatcher, but actually you're much more like Harold Wilson.
You're talking total nonsense, because neither of those distinguished people had to deal with a pandemic on the scale that we have. Neither of them had a fiscal meteorite hit their system in the scale that we have.
True.
Well, I think I'm grateful because we've had to look after the British people with £407 billion of protection for their jobs, for people's livelihoods. And I'll tell you something about that package. It was most beneficial to the poorest and the neediest in society. And what you're now seeing is the British economy bouncing back more strongly than any other G7 economy. And you're seeing that because this government took the tough decisions which were objected to at the time to open up our economy and to do the vaccine rollout in the way that we did. And that's why we now have the fastest growing economy in the G7.
Your colleague
and unemployment falling as fast as it is.
Your colleague, Jacob Rees-Mogg, says that Britain is taxed as highly as the country can afford. And many Conservative MPs, David Davis being an example, say we cannot have more taxes on the working class. Can you at least give them and people watching and the Conservative Party this promise? You're not going to raise taxes yet again in the budget.
I can tell you that you have no fiercer and more zealous opponent of unnecessary tax rises than me. But we've had to deal with a pandemic on a scale which this country has not seen before in our lifetimes and long before. We don't want to raise taxes. Of course,
are you going to do it again?
But what we will not do is be irresponsible with the public finances. And you mentioned Margaret Thatcher.
Are you going to do it again?
What Margaret Thatcher?
Are you going to do it again?
If I can possibly avoid it, I do not want to raise taxes again. Of course not.
All right, that's
neither I do, nor does Rishi Sunak.
Prime Minister, we're out of time.
Margaret Thatcher would not have borrowed more money now. I'll tell you that much. For free.
All right, Boris Johnson, for free. Thanks very much indeed for talking to us